Hello, good people. Welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we explore role-playing video games in depth. My name is Jeff Rude, the host, and the new 3D golf simulation While I Know Kiseki of this operation. Joining me, as always, we have greatest driver. It's Braden, Arbitrary Water Redacted. Hello, Braden.
Hello. I am here with my 6-button controller, my weird square polygons, and my general hatred of humanity.
Also joining us for this special Kusolstice episode of Off the Deep End, we have the old Devil's Course Wicked 18 himself. That is Chris Zombie Pirate Acted. Hello, Chris.
$2.99.
All the hits coming out today. And joining us for this very special Kusolstice Kusoge-themed episode of Off the Deep End, we have Pebble Beach Golf Links himself. It's Nick PandaMonium. Nick, say your last name on here, or
yeah, you can. That's fine.
It's Nick Broadway of the Shiro Network. Hello, Nick.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. Long live Death Crimson, and I'm very happy we're talking about Virtual Hydlide, an all-time classic.
It is an all-time classic of sorts.
I was very excited when Jeff was like, hey, this guy, he did a 4-hour video on Virtua Cop. And I said, oh, he's perfect.
Yeah. Some of our listeners may not know all about you, Nick. I'll lead off by saying right now in English, there's like, you know, maybe 2 or 3 videos that I watch like every single week on like chrono gaming stuff. It's Jeremy Parrish, who's just will be doing this until he'll be doing that after he's dead. He'll probably just pre-record a bunch of stuff. Yes, yeah. Literally, it's in his name. And then yours. It just absolutely, like, the primary source stuff that you are doing around the Sega Saturn library is of like infinitely more value than anything I've like ever done in this space. It's absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to hear it. They're a lot of fun to make, and I really, really, really enjoy making those videos. So it's very happy to hear.
I can't imagine it's easy to be chasing down all these folks. So the amount of patience you've got in doing that, remarkable. And you're a very graceful interviewer too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And some people are more accessible than others. Sometimes they respond instantly and I interview them within a week. Sometimes it takes, half a year to get them on the record. But
it's a shame you didn't get Mike Ditka to show up,
I know. I tried. I don't know. So it turns out he does media appearances, but for like 5-digit amounts of dollars. It's ridiculous. And I just that's not...
We're not playing on that level. Oh, so we have been doing Off the Deep End spin-offs of the Deep Listen main channel stuff for about 2 years now.
Almost there. 2-year anniversary coming up.
Happy early anniversary.
Thank you. We set an initial goal of outliving the Confederacy. and we're
an
halfway.
Honorable goal.
Yeah.
You're getting close.
You should aspire to nothing less, right, with all of your creative endeavors. And we did a Kuso roundup at some point last year, which was kind of fun. We've been taking Patreon requests pretty much all this year around other stuff we've been doing. And we'd like to continue doing that. But we'd also, some of you are recommending good things. Some of you are recommending Legend of Dragoon and other kind of bad games. But like pure actual treacle or tripe, Kuso, I guess, let's just go for it, kind of few and far between. So I think we're going to try to do one of these literally every solstice going forward. Just grab one of those, really dig down deep into the earth and pull up something pretty bad. This is going to be the first Kusolstice special, and it's on Virtual Hydlide, as we've alluded to. Virtual Hydlide, as you may or may not know, was developed by T&E Soft, those purveyors of quality golf software such as New 3D Golf Simulation, Waialae no Kiseki, etc. It was published by Sega in Japan and in PAL territories. It was actually published by Atlas in North America. The first release date for this game was April 28th, 1995 in Japan, which oddly enough makes it one of like the first, if not the first, 32-bit home console RPGs, which is funny, and we'll probably talk about
It's remarkable.
that. If you would like to be a part of pre-show discussions about games such as Virtual Hydlide or other notable detritus, you can swing by a Patreon we have that is at patreon.com/deeplistens. Kicking in any dollar amount will get you access to an ultra-secret Discord full of cool people and me. You can also send questions to us via electronic mail. Send those sorts of inquiries to inquiries@deep.lol. We still have the vanity URL, and we are never giving it up. And if you want to see the full fruits of this labor, you can go to bit.ly, that is bit.ly/OTDE rank. That is bit.ly/OTDE rank. And see where we're going to stick Virtual Hydlide in amongst stuff like Lord of the Rings The Third Age for the GBA and Unlimited Saga. Not to pre-game this a little bit, but it's probably going in around there.
Oh, I don't know, Jeff. I don't know.
So T&E Soft.
They've made games before that are of a quality. T&E Soft has a long history. I'm pretty sure they don't exist anymore. I believe they later formed a new successor company after about, what, Jeff, 2010, 2012?
They didn't make it through the aughts. I know that.
They're definitely Dunyan Rings for sure, and have been for some time.
I forget what happened to their new shell company, but D4 is what acquired all of their video game enterprises, which, if you don't know, D4 is a content delivery service where they just republish everything.
Okay.
You might know them as the Project Egg people, EGG people that re-release old school games like Gradius. I think they did a YR Kung Fu. And even like Twinbee, they owned the rights to a lot of MSX games. And for the longest time, they were the people porting MSX and Neo Geo titles to the Virtual Console for the OG Wii.
Weird.
They've also done a lot of the re-releases for Compile.
That's even weirder.
With the Puyo Puyo people,
yeah,
right?
Man, I just spent a little time writing about Compile this week because I'm trying to frame.
Well, I mean, they also own the rights, like completely own the rights to Mado Monogatari, the dungeon crawler role-playing game from Compile.
The Puyo Puyo crawler. The one that like sends various consoles out to pasture. I think it was the last Japanese Mega Drive game was that Mado Monogatari republish they did, or Compile did, obviously. Anyway.
The weird thing with T&E Soft, while we'll talk about the legacy of Hydlide and how it's very prescient in terms of the state of JRPGs, their big crease was, as we've kind of been hinting, golf games and puzzle games. Like that was their call to fame in a lot of people. Yeah, sure, there was that weird 3DO Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I think, Slayer game that was only a Japanese release, but they really leaned into this almost weird brand of when in doubt and they needed to make money for a quarter, they just published a golf game. And
it's their moneymaker.
It was. That Pebble Beach game is still widely considered like an all-time great golf game.
Oh, yeah. It's legitimately good. Memes aside, it's kind of all right.
Yeah, you posted in the wrong neighborhood? What?
Yeah.
Think you can get it?
It's okay.
Inside
you are allowed to say the line. It's yours, okay? You get to Craig Stadler is now yours.
Think you can get it inside mine?
Like one of the last games T&E Soft made was like True Swing Golf for the Nintendo DS. So they had that brand and they cashed in until they're falling apart later. It's important to note that a large portion of T&E Soft's JRPG division went on to form Chunsoft and Spike, and later amalgamated into Spike Chunsoft. So many of these people who worked on Hydlide and even probably Virtual Hydlide are still working in the industry, making JRPGs.
Are they making good JRPGs nowadays?
I mean, do you like Zero Escape?
They're those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are those people.
They are
but
making
also
your...
Jeff Jeffersons.
Mhm.
They also went on to become the Tornico team, Tornico's Dungeon.
Yeah. So they're making like Sheeta and the Wanderer stuff.
Yeah.
That is oddly prescient for the game we're talking about today.
Yeah,
which is
that's more than I would have expected.
Kind of
from
wild.
The very ambitious T&D Soft.
Yeah. Pebble Beach Golf is the only long box North American Saturn game I own, and it's probably the only one I'm ever going to own. I bought a loose...
That's fine.
I bought a loose copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga from somebody a couple of years ago for about $300, and I could probably sell it for about twice that now, but I'm not going to. But that's loose, and I hate those long Saturn boxes so much. They're so goddamn bad.
I love them. I'm a big fan. I just love how much space they take up on the shelf.
Yeah.
And how like dominant they are over everything else you could put next to them, jewel cases and DVD boxes and stuff. They're just super fragile.
It's one of the perfect like Saturn versus PlayStation isms. Like Sony also played that game for like a year, and then they were like, you know what, everyone hates this. And also this probably cost us 4 cents, whereas the CD jewel cases cost us like half a cent because there's already a billion of them. And Sega's just like, nah, this is perfect. Bernie Stoller's just like, these are God's cases, and by God, the Dreamcast should use these too.
Bernie Stoller was still on the Sony team at this time. You watch your mouth.
At this point, I suppose that's true.
It was still the PS1 team.
God, Bernard Stoller. Yeah.
If he joined up with Sega, I want to say early 97.
He apparently had an active role in making the development and launch of the Dreamcast happen. So yeah.
Yeah, he was very, Saturn is not our future, etc. But yeah, you guys are absolutely right. He was the Sony man at this point. So he had nothing to do with Hydlide, and he wouldn't have liked it anyway because it's built out of sprites. Just like Pebble Beach Golf. But that's ahead of ourselves because we've got to talk a little bit about Hydlide the thing first. So Chris, you've spent some time exploring the various Hydlides of the world.
Why, yes, Jeff. Of the people on this podcast, I decided to go one step further than was recommended. I decided to play at least 1 hour of every Hydlide game ever made. Which included Hydlide, Hydlide 2, Shine of Darkness. Wait, which version? I think I played the MS. No, I did play the MSX version of Hydlide.
Okay.
Then I played the MSX version. I emulated using Womb, which we should probably talk about the state of Saturn emulation at some point. Then I played Super Hydlide for the Genesis.
Hell yeah.
And then I played this wonderful game that has been subjected to me against my consent, but I guess we should mention. So I played, I think, Super Hydlide, and that was just the game that I played. And I remember even as a youngin' thinking that Super Hydlide kind of sucked and was not fun. And it had a very weird experience system. It has a morality system, and it has a 4 save slot system, which was novel and important at the time. But in terms of comparing this game to its then contemporaries, like the Yeast franchise in particular, Hydlide always felt like a weirdly one step behind the curve or just malicious in a way that everyone else was slowly starting to move away from. But I played every single game in this franchise. It took a lot out of me. I think part of my soul is gone as a result. And as we'll talk about later, very important franchise, even with all of our experiences with Virtual Hydlide.
Yeah. So for those of you who have not taken the plunge, first of all, you're not missing a lot right now these days. But if you're curious, they are, kind of well-worn fodder for your angry video game nerds of the world. But the Hydlide series, from its inception, was basically a top-down ARPG adjacent experience. if you were to sort of like make a scale, a linear scale, and on one side you would put something like Dragon Slayer 1, and on the other side put...
Or Xanadu.
Actually. And on the other side put Ys. Take that slider and move it about 2 pips from Dragon Slayer towards Ys, and you're kind of getting there.
And in terms of the school of thought, in terms of during this era, if we're talking about JRPGs, you were either pulling from or cribbing from Wizardry or Ultima. I would say that this franchise traditionally pulled more from the original Ultima games than Wizardry, especially considering the top-down perspective. You're usually only leveling up life, strength, and magic, which very much resembles a lot of the combat mechanics and systems of Ultima. And playing this game reminded me of our experience with Ultima 4.
Virtual Hydlide specifically, or original Hydlide?
Original Hydlide, Hydlide 2, Super Hydlide was when I think this started to become its own thing.
Yeah.
And then Virtual Hydlide is, we'll talk about it, but what's y'all's experience with the Hydlides?
Okay. I'll go first. I have played this game. I am aware of Hydlide because of its reputation and because of its surprising prevalence in the speedrunning scene. Maikuyama of the GDQ really likes running Super Hydlide. Seems like a real piece of work. The game, not Mike. He seems like a nice guy. And I played this, and we'll talk about this.
I have played the NES original. I've actually not fiddled around with any of the Japanese PC ports of this. There is a Windows version of I think the first 2 Hydlide games that came out, I think in the late 90s or early aughts, that is apparently like, if you must do this to yourself, do this. These are the nicest, most complete, cleanest, most accessible, and I think they're probably on sale somewhere, probably. And if they're not, they're on the website. When I said that, imagine it was underlined. The famous one, it's in Canada, has things on it. Anyway, so I've fiddled around with that, and then Super Hydlide in its Famicom form, which is called Hydlide 3, which has the distinction of having been published by, take a guess, Namco, which is why I'm interested in it. And then this. So I guess I've played actually 2 versions of Super Hydlide, then I've played Hydlide 3 for the Famicom, and then the Genesis version. They're pretty similar. Hydlide 3 just kind of runs and looks a little worse, if you can imagine. It's top-down actiony thing, but just with a little too grognardy crap slapped onto it. You've got stats, you've got, for lack of a better word, like an encumbrance system and a morality system. It's just kind of like added layers of tedium. Something I appreciated in retrospect compared to comparing Hydlide 3, Stroke Super Hydlide, to Virtual Hydlide, I was actually surprised how much I appreciated the stripped down nature of this game, for what it's worth. Because there's really not a lot to it, but you actually have to play this game, and that part's pretty bad.
Yep.
How much Hydlide experience did you get, Nick, before you dove into the V Hydlide world, the V Hydlide lifestyle?
Complete honesty, not a ton.
Yeah.
I mean, I played a little bit of the NES Hydlide, like less than an hour before I decided that there were better things to do with my time, and some of Super Hydlide, which I think of the OG Hydlide, Super Hydlide might be the most tolerable, but it's
like
just not.
We're asking people to pick between polio and syphilis. It's like, sure, I'll take syphilis, but with no enthusiasm.
It's a real would you rather type situation for sure. So I can't recommend any of them. I've played Virtual Hydlide the most out of any of the Hydlide games, by far.
I mean, that's almost something that's worth talking about, is that, as Jeff will probably talk about later, like Hydlide is super important in the JRPG area, especially domestically in Japan, and it made T&E Soft kind of a brand name alongside their golf games, but it was important for a crease, especially when they decided to pick a crease towards MS, like in the MSX community or the NEC PC brands. And then even going into the Saturn platforms, like the Hydlide games were your go-to, that's your choice, that and Ys. And they only made so many Ys games. And Hydlide's important, but it kind of falls into the same category as Tower of Druaga, which is important, but goddamn, I don't think they ever made a playable game.
Yeah, and I think it's also colored by how these games came out in the United States, or more importantly, when. If you played Hydlide in 1984, it would have probably seemed pretty incredible in the way that I think if Tower of Druaga had come out in the United States around the time it actually launched, it would have been at least, again, kind of palatable. Hydlide came out 2 years after Zelda 1 on the NES in North America, so hold up, The Legend of Zelda and then the Famicom stroke NES version of Hydlide, which is like very garish pink border around the whole thing and just very creaky. It feels like, a 4-year-old.
An Ultima shell. But like even in Japan, they almost self-sabotaged themselves because they released the game alongside Dragon Slayer and Xanadu. So like even in Japan, like the audience that gravitated towards Hydlide was small.
Yeah.
And sick.
And served pretty well by both of those. Like Dragon Slayer, very huge game. Xanadu, actually kind of still holds, like, almost playable today. Almost. Hydlide, a bit creaky. Yeah, as mentioned up top, this winds up being, by virtue of when it came out, kind of the first one of these. By which I mean a 32-bit Japanese role-playing game. Certainly the first one that released in the United States, anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm discounting a lot of like what came out on the 3DO in Japan to make this case, because I ain't got the 3DO library in the back of my head very well. But what a stunning debut for 32-bit Japanese role-playing games on these modern disc-based systems. Like, when you hold it up in that light, it's particularly weird. Like, this predates Beyond the Beyond in North America and some other, let's call them also rans of that genre of game. But I don't know if it's that valuable, the comparison, because this is really kind of doing its own thing. And even doing its own thing, it's doing something kind of weird. Because this is basically a conversion of the first Hydlide game, but done in the same, let's call it, visual treatment stroke engine that T&E Soft developed for Pebble Beach Golf for the Saturn. And it relies on random seed generation for each world that you play. To wit, this is kind of a roguelike.
Yep.
Like, this has rogue DNA in it, which is not something that Hydlide really had. Like, those games were fixed classically. Like, they everything was kind of pre-laid out. Like, a walkthrough was a valuable walkthrough everywhere. For this game, it's not really the case unless you're working off the same seeds, which is, like, in a way, really cool. I don't think what comes out of those seeds is wonderful, but the notion that this is like, I think the citation you put in your video is like 40 billion world. Like, they put some ridiculous number on the back of the box, which I didn't character count the symbols in there, but let's say it's like alphanumeric and numbers and there's 10 slots. Like, you can do some factorial math there and figure this out, but that seems kind of high.
It does, yeah. There are 32 characters. There's all 26 capital letters, a few random symbols, and a space, and up to 10 characters. Now, that's the extent of my math skills.
Yeah.
But anyone who knows how to, calculate combination amounts can use that to figure it out. The manual does boast, like, it was either 40 million or 40 billion different possible maps. And, like, what happens is the map, you randomly generate it shits out this like 10 character code, and you can also put in your own code if you want, like share your map with friends, or just type in some random 10 letter word or however many letter word, and it'll generate a map based off of that. Some weird formulaic map generating stuff going on there. It's great. So Kind of ambitious. This game does a lot of stuff that's, when you really break it down, certain elements of it are very ambitious for the time.
It has huspa.
Yeah, it does.
A mighty huspa.
Even though this is an action RPG made from a fucking golf game engine.
How did we all determine what seed we were going to use? Because you can just say, "Hey, make me a virtual Hydlide," and it'll just spin one up for you, as you said. But you can also, as you said, just put in words.
Right. You can put in any word you want. It'll generate a map based off it.
What determined what we did there? I guess going around the table here. I'll start. I went to so this game also has points. Very valuable points in the grand tradition of RPGs from the 80s with weird vestigial limb arcade sort of aspirations to them. And I looked at that score table, and each one of them was named after basically one of the monsters or bosses in this game. And the bottom one was Jelly. So I kind of took that as a clue of sorts that was one of the like maps that they kind of like vetted. And I just typed in Jelly, and that's the version that I played. So it's as good a logic as any.
Yeah, I went with Eat Assland for my most recent playthrough and getting ready for the podcast. Yeah.
It's a popular pastime, I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Braden, how'd you determine what happened?
I went into this tabula rasa. I went in as a blank slate, untouched by the philosophies of men, and I said, "Give me the Hydlide."
You spun the Hydlide wheel. Hydlide roulette.
Hydlide dice.
I went with the word flat because I wanted the least amount of bullshit in my game, and the game did not oblige with my personal request. Thank you very much. I didn't want any hills. I didn't want forests. I just wanted flat field is what I typed. And nah, didn't work.
Man, the hills in this game.
It should be mentioned what happens when you toggle the different difficulty settings and how it impacts the map.
Yeah.
So on easy difficulty, the map is shown in full, and there are destination points that are marked, so you have a little bit easier of a time figuring out where you need to go and doing your quest markers. On medium difficulty, the map is only uncovered as you explore, so there's like a shadow effect, if you will. But the destination points are still there. And so you can figure out, okay, I can go due north, and maybe there's going to be a town or an NPC person there that I can talk to and pick up a quest. On hard difficulty, you got nothing. Complete fog of war. There's no mini-map, nothing. And the map only is uncovered when you explore it. That's why when I was checking out multiple guides, they all said, yo, just play this game on easy. And even then, God save your soul.
Yeah, this is not worth trying in hard mode at all. It's barely playable, I should say, in any of the difficulties.
I'm gonna admit, there's parts of this game that I think I accidentally liked a little bit in a Stockholm way.
Yeah.
But I read that difficulty option because like I kind of knew what I was getting into here playing this, but the notion of like, again, there's random generation to this, and if you've got no signposting for any of the stuff in this game, it does genuinely turn into a like net hack rogue experience after a certain point. Like that's just setting the slider all the way in that direction, and that's kind of cool. And if the act of playing this game was like anywhere approaching good, they could have had something with that. It falls apart in the playing of it. Like all the other like ideas they had, I think are legitimately kind of cool. I think the medium one seems kind of backwards in a way, though. Like if you've got your, hey, this is where the crucifix you need is, and it's going to be blinking on the map. And it's like, well, you don't really care what's in between me and that. Then it's like, what if it was just a map that didn't have icons on it? I don't know. I'd have flipped those, but I don't work at T&E Soft in 1994, so what do I know? But yeah, I absolutely played this on easy because I'm a content tourist at this point, and I just wanted to check out Jelly, the world of Jim. Which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, the canonical name for the character in this game is just Jim.
Just Jim.
Right.
No, yeah.
Just
Right.
Jim.
It's a choice. It's a
I feel like we're
choice.
burying the lead a little bit because how is Jim presented?
So I don't think it's known
Well,
who it was that the render
It's
was made
not
off
known.
of.
Right.
But so this game, as we mentioned, it's based on a golf simulation. So if you've ever seen like famous examples like the golf games for the Sega Genesis, right? They for the EA ones. So you play on like a golf course, you hit the ball lands, and then the next thing the game does is basically draw a scene around where that golf ball would be. So it draws, a skybox, a fairway, rough around the fairway, puts down trees, and then puts down like where a green would be off in the distance, like kind of slowly draws these elements in and creates a tableau of sorts out of sprites. And it only needs to do that every once in a while because you're only, hitting a ball 5 or 6 times in a hole ish. The golf engine they developed for Pebble Beach does a fairly similar thing. It's just kind of higher resolution sprites and draws things ever so slightly quicker, and is a little better at like, I guess, modeling 3-dimensional terrain. But it's still using sprites for basically every object, including the golfer himself, who in that game is famously Craig the Walrus Statler, or a handful of other golfers, as a digitized person, similar to the technology used in bad games like Super Mario RPG, a game that sucks and is terrible. I will never let this
sprinkling some spice.
It's a bad game.
Controversy drives
Classic.
click.
Yeah,
Haven't played yet.
getting those clicks. So they take that engine and they get rid of Craig Stadler, already a bad start, and they replace him with a brown-haired man of indeterminate origin. And basically, they I don't know how this happened, but let's assume I'm right here. They get this man in a booth, and they take about I would wager several dozen photographs of this man from about 8 angles, your orthogonal directions around this man. And then they say, thank you, goodbye, we'll take care of this. And he said, do I need to like wear costume stuff? They're like, no, we got it. We'll take care of it. And that's who you play as. Most of the game, you are playing as a man facing away from you named Jim, who has got a very, like, I just call it what it is. He looked like he pooed himself. He has a very, like, my trow, there's a problem in here. I've got to waddle over and, like, take care of this situation, and the restroom's on the other side of the amusement park posture.
I would describe this Jim sprite as man bringing his family to Disneyland-esque. Just like this slightly balding, brown-haired white man who just looks like a dude you would see sitting alone in the corner of a Denny's with amazing digitized sprite work, including armor that changes if you equip different armor.
It does change.
When I think of high fantasy, I really just want to play as a guy who looks like an average white Midwest stepdad. Like, that's the ultimate hero of any game.
Yeah. He might have been wearing, like, Ren Fair wear for these photographs. The thing is...
To be perfectly honest, that's what I was thinking, is it looks like I'm in a Renaissance fair digitized for a video game. And again, the comparisons to the 3DO I feel are apt because, like, everything in the 3DO was like some sort of multimedia virtual tour of something. And I definitely got vibes from that, where it's like, this is literally, okay, this is just a tour, a virtual tour of some sort of fantasy skybox a person made with like a handful of costumes you bought from a Spirit Halloween store.
Yeah, like the fairy armor.
Oh my god, the fairy armor in this
God,
band
Jesus.
looks
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to be said about how the game looks. I also feel like there's a lot to be said about how this game sounds.
Yeah. I have to assume that in like Resident Evil 1 style, they just yanked the first handful of white people they saw hang out in Japan, and they put them in front of a green screen and said, go.
Oh, like the opening
Just run.
cinematic?
Yes, the amazing opening cinematic. And ending cinematic.
The
Or
actors
even-
in this game are not credited. Like,
Yeah.
to this day,
See.
no one has stepped forward and said, "I'm Jim."
It's like a pornographic
I mean,
film.
it-
It's just non-union actors all the
For-
way down.
That's right.
It's probably never going to happen. It would require a massive amount of research, but just by comparison, it took like literal decades for people to find the people who were in the original Resident Evil. And, you know, Resident Evil is a big franchise. We only recently in the last year or so figured out who says Resident Evil at the start of the first game. I don't think we'll ever find Jim. God rest his soul if he's no longer on this planet.
Right. We can only hope that someday he'll come out of the woodwork. But
I only discovered recently that the individual on the cover of Black Sabbath's hit album Black Sabbath was unknown until like 2 or 3 years ago.
jeez.
That person was she was some model who they hired for like a day basically to go do a photo shoot. The name now is gone from my memory, but that was just like who is this mysterious person, and no one knew or no one was going to tell. But yeah, weird how this has happened, because like this is, you know, clearly a fairly infamous game.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that we may never know the true identity of Jim. But on the other hand, everyone already knows Jim, probably. We have someone in our life.
We know enough about Jim. That's right.
Yeah. Like, we could... Okay, ROM hacking, if you're listening, get on this. We're going to digitize a bunch of stepdads. Like, everyone's got a stepdad they know in their life. Get them in the booth and do fan hacks of Virtual Hydlide. It's like Virtual Hydlide Jerry edition. And it's just Jerry and Richard and Dave and like all the great stepdads of the world. And they're just like rescuing various princesses. It would be fantastic. How did we play this game? Because I have brief tales there. I guess I'll tell my tale. I was intending to buy a loose copy of this North American version, and then I saw that full Japanese copies were going for like not terrible money, and I have a Japanese Saturn anyway, so I just about took the plunge. But I thought I would test things out first, so I went to that website from Canada and was reading my Bible, and suddenly there it was on my computer that I deleted after 24 hours, the Japanese version of this game. And I was like, shit, all these menus are in Japanese. There's no way I can wing this. And that's ridiculous. I should have just got the Japanese version of this game, because there's so little to actually read and so little spoken dialogue. In fact, there's functionally none. The worst of it is just menu stuff, but based on my experience with this game, inventory shit doesn't really matter. Like, there's really no reason to not play the Japanese version of this, as long as you can stomach a little bit of like kind of basic kanji and like kana stuff. You probably do just fine. But with that in mind, I wound up playing this on a thing called RetroArch on a thing called an Xbox One X. And the only issue I had was after about every 45 minutes, this game would hardlock. Like every single time. And it makes me wonder if it's just a core issue or something like that.
That could be on TND Soft's end. Yeah, I don't
know. It
know.
Could be on TNE Soft's end. It did happen twice in the vampire's house, which made me wonder. It's like, wow, there's sure are drawing a lot of square polygons in here. We're going buck wild. Maybe we've just created some sort of, you know, graphical error. It just couldn't handle the power of Virtual Hydlide.
It's too many chairs. It couldn't take all the chairs.
Too many chests, too many bats. There are too many damn bats. So that was my fun experience. Chris, you sounded like you had a particular fun time with this.
I also played this on RetroArch, but it should be noted that RetroArch has two predominant emulators to use related to Saturn emulation. The first of which is Beetle, which is a different offshoot of Mednafin, and the other is Yaba or Yabuse. I would strongly recommend the Beetle core that you can do, because Mednafin is I would call a very much superior alternative to the other Sega Saturn emulators. RetroArch supports .chd files, which are basically the lossless files that you get when you're running MAME in particular. Mednafin is the more accurate but also the more demanding Saturn emulator. Kronos is a fork of it, I believe actually Chronos is a fork of Yaba Sanshiro 2, and your mileage may vary between Yaba Sanshiro 2, and Chronos, but I actually find Chronos is the easiest to do with CD swapping, which I didn't bother with CD swapping with this thing. And Saturn emulation is weird. It's in a weird spot, but it's good. It's solved. It's
better now.
It's solved, but for the longest time, it was like one of those weird, like, elusive dragons that people were trying to chase after.
Yeah. For several years, I'd been using Mednathan with the Med GUI front end on this PC, but I got into the dark. My office is on one side of the house, and then our living room with, like, a fireplace and a projector and 2 couches and, like, where my wife likes to be at the end of the day. So the other end of the house. So I paid the $20 to do God's work on an Xbox Series X so I could not have to hide in my office and do this shit. But otherwise I would have been straight med-defending this, because my results with that have been pretty solid for several years now, to the point where I've actually not updated my Mednathan client in, like, years.
The only quick thing with Mednathan, Chronos, and Yaba Sanshiro 2 is if you care about Sega Titan Video or STV. All Sega Titan Video games are launchable on Linux, but for whatever reason, they all have problems on Windows. So that didn't impact us here, but it does impact us if we wanted to check out other Sega Saturn games in the future.
I played Burning Rangers for like 30 minutes and was like, wait, this is a firefighting game?
Yeah. Burning Rangers.
Futuristic firefighting game.
It's got transparencies. It's crazy.
I'm very excited to do bad things with the Saturn library. Played some... When I inevitably revive the horror streams, gonna have to play Deep Fear at some point.
You gotta play Deep Fear, yeah. That's got some
I love shitty Resident Evil clones, and there's an untapped well of them just right below the surface, the Saturn.
See, Deep Fear is good. It's got some stuff to it that will make you think otherwise, for sure.
Nick, have you played Countdown Vampires?
No,
No,
I haven't.
I played Countdown Vampires this year. Sorry for the tangent.
No.
And it was a transcendent experience.
I wish I still had my copy. I bought it when I thought I was going to be doing the Twitch game like 10 years ago. I found a copy of it for like $10 or something, and I was like, this looks not great. And then I didn't do the Twitch thing and sold it for like around $10. And that's one of those PlayStation games that for whatever reason just like
now it's $120.
Yeah. And you know, hey, $120 is not going to like change my life or anything, but such that I want to speculate on any of this shit, I may as well like come out ahead. So yeah, it's just made me like, I'm never selling any of these Japanese Mega Drive games, like ever. I know what I have.
So Countdown Vampires is one of the most like deeply inept video games I've ever made in terms of like, why would you do this? Why would you make this way? Just some real cargo cult game design where it's like, we did it like this because Resident Evil did it, but we have no idea why they did it that way.
A lot of that sentiment applies to this game that we're going to go back talking about.
Wow, thank you for the segue. I was going to do that segue. Thanks.
Solid.
Panda, how did you play this game?
On a good old Sega Saturn. I don't have an actual copy of the game. Most Saturn games I play, I don't own, and that's just kind of the way of the Saturn scene at this point. They're all too expensive, and have been even before the retro like price hike happened. Saturn games have always been more costly than other consoles and collect games for.
It's almost the nature of the beast, considering the weird life cycle of the Saturn.
Exactly. With a library not lasting that long.
You're telling me we don't own one of the 50,000 North American copies of Panzer Dragoon Saga that ever existed?
Oh, everybody who's ever played it owns a copy. Yeah, it's just
it's like Earthbound.
Right.
I'm not. Sometimes I do actually literally go hold my copy of a thing when I say it on the show. I'm not, but I'm looking at the CD binder that it's in. But yeah, That is the most I'm ever spending on a single fucking video game, and no one should do that, like, ever. That's very silly. I'm
not recommended.
No. I would be really stunned if they didn't get Forever Entertainment to just do that, seeing as they've already did Panzer Dragoon 1, and they sure seem to like to work. They just did those Front Mission remaster things. So
yeah.
Anyway,
the Genesis and I feel like even the Master System has a better re-release program than the Sega Saturn. Like, Sega has not re-released a lot of these games other than maybe Knights and some version of Burning Rangers. But, like, God, what I would do to have the Saturn be re-released in the Mega Drive or Genesis re-release program that they've done on virtually every platform ever, right?
For like almost 20 years now, they've been like going back to the well on those games, and they've left, some like pretty quality first-party Sega stuff just like out in the cold for years and years and years now. And there were some technological barriers to that stuff, but today it seems pretty solved. And I know that Cotton Collection on the Switch, people doing God's work have basically side-loaded a bunch of Saturn software into the emulator that makes those work, and it seems to be like pretty rock solid. So
yeah, it's pretty okay. There's some input lag issues with the emulator that the Cotton port uses.
Okay.
It's using SSF basically. Hackers figured out, they just bought SSF and used it, and other than that, it works pretty okay. If you can handle like some input lag, which for a shmup you can't.
No.
But
when we're talking about like
it is otherwise
Mystara and stuff, like
the
weird oceans of like turn-based RPGs and stuff, like your Shining Force 3s and the like.
Like Sakura Wars, stuff like that. Never got released in the West officially.
Majin Tensei.
I'm holding out for Tengai Makyo 4 Apocalypse fan translation at some point, but I'm holding out for a lot of Tengai Makyo stuff because I'm sick. We're really dancing around talking about this game. How far did we each make it into this? Nick, yours is documented.
Yep.
Yours is online as a confessional. You've never finished Virtual Hydlide. I put it to you.
I know, I'm such a flab. I got to like the last boss, and then I decided after several hours of playing this fucking game and suffering through single-digit frame rates, I was done. It really is a physically taxing experience to play Virtual Hydlide. I was falling asleep at the controller. I was drained. There's
just a lot of tedium. So like, the arc of this game, especially if you're playing on easy and it's literally just like telling you to go here precisely and get this thing, is you start roughly in the center of this map, you go to a graveyard, you acquire a crucifix from a random tombstone, you then go to a vampire house and hit 5 orbs, fight a vampire, then go into a cave network dungeon thing, acquire a magic sword, and then you fight the dragon? Or one of these
something
spectral
along those lines.
floaty things.
There's some in between like places you go here and there. Like there's like a couple of mazes, but if you're playing on easy and you have the map, then you don't really like need to use, you don't need to like solve the maze. Essentially, you can just look at the map and be like, oh, I got to go here, here, and here. But where it gets tricky is there's like some mazes where you have to go to the dead ends to get essential items from chests. Like, for example, that dragon where you have to get the sword that shoots fire orbs to kill the dragon. You have to like go to each chest until you find the one that has the sword, and that's not indicated on the map. It's just a crapshoot.
So that's something I'm curious about, the seeding of this game, and this gets to speedrun talk, I suppose, such that we really want to indulge that, I guess. But like,
there is a speedrun seed for Virtual Hydlide.
But like the world maps are seed based and like procedurally generated. My question is, do those seeds preserve treasure chest contents? Or if those are also like proc-genned on entry, because that seems, there's not a lot going on in this game. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this could also hold in memory, like, hey, the chest on this third dead-end blind alley of this dungeon is the one that has a magic sword, and everything else is just like vendor trash and other RPGs, or just, gold, which is points. Or if it is randomly procced. Because if it's randomly seeded, there's a world where you do just wind up having to go, especially if you play this on the higher difficulties, blindly into every one of these dungeons, and literally have to just like open every single chest to find a magic sword, which you absolutely need after a certain point to do ranged attacks to progress in this game. But that is about the point when I started pondering that, where I was like, okay, I think I get it. I'm good. We're gonna set this down.
Yeah. Just kind of browsing through like the speedrun resources, it would seem that like whatever code you enter or get, you know, at the beginning when your 10 character map code, that seems to also play a role into where the items are placed.
Okay. So there's,
you know, I don't know if there's an optimal 10 character code that they figured out. I mean, again, there's 40 billion possibilities, so there's a lot for them to go through.
Ideally, it would be like a procedurally generated map where like every single, you know, necessary dungeon was like adjacent to each other. But the other thing is the map is not that big.
Oh, it's pretty tiny.
And you've got a sprint button by default, which you look hilarious running around, and it does not feel very good to run in this game.
Dude, Jim is a marathon champion.
But you can like end to end this map in like a minute, probably, if it weren't for terrain and like trees and stuff in the way. Though, as you pointed out, he does smartly run around trees.
He does, yeah. That's one of the ambitious details of Virtual Hydlide. He automatically runs around them. They made a big deal about that in Breath of the Wild when the horse automatically goes around trees. T&D Soft, they had you beat, bud. They had you beat Nintendo.
Jim.
Oh, dude, you could save anywhere in the game, which at the time for like a 3D adventure game like that, being able to save anywhere and continue from any part of the map was kind of nuts. And I think we're overlooking the fact that this is an arcade-style action RPG in the sense that when you die, you go to a continue screen that counts down from 10. And if you game over, you enter your score, the amount of points you got in this action RPG, into a high score like leaderboard on your console. Like, it's whack. They didn't like know what genre of game they were making.
So that's like that should be a new speedrun category. Is just like score run. Like
score,
no other objectives matter, or like a low score run, basically.
Right.
Which is just, I guess, like the pacifist version of this game. Which, by the way, is how you should play it.
Yeah, you get really no reward for killing like fodder enemies in the overworld. Like, it really is optimal to just sprint and to just run around.
So it is an action role-playing game, but there is some sort of pseudo economy level system, but it's much more, let's say, it's a bit of a step backward when you compare it to the previous Hydlide games, which had stats and points for you to accrue through exploration and killing of foes. So I guess in playing the older games, that was the thing of like, oh, I see. And in my head, cognitively, I was like, okay, so clearly you really wanted this digitized, procedurally generated world. Maybe you had to take a step backward in terms of the mechanics, but you barely do any role-playing gaming in this thing.
There's no
like
experience points. Like, you level up
axe.
the level.
Yeah, like there's barely an economy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There's no interaction, really, with anything. Like, there are signs you can read, I suppose, but like, you know, there are no NPCs. There are no, not that any, like, that you can do an RPG missing like some of the things that this game does not have, but all of them, like, like this is weirdly close to the Tower of Jiraga, I guess. Now that, as you've pointed out, the arcade similarity, like, it feels like a score attack thing after a certain point, which is kind of far away from what the original Hydlide was, as EP was saying. It's just kind of weird. Like, it's a bizarre, just a bizarre set of choices they made in this.
Yeah.
And playing it cannot be emphasized enough. So we were talking about, I guess, the visual stylings of this game. So, as I said, kind of the golf, like, you know, every time the ball is set somewhere on a fairway, it kind of has to redraw a scene. This game is doing that on a like per frame basis or a per animation basis. Like, every step or change in perspective for Jim is accompanied by a change in perspective in the world. So everything winds up shifting. But redrawing that is not happening at the same refresh rate as the Saturn is able to output. So the game just kind of chugs along, and we're talking single-digit frames a lot of the time. Generous, in the best of times, it actually kind of, if you're in an environment that doesn't have a lot going on, it probably sits at about 30. And I wouldn't say it looks stupendous, but like it's going for a style. But as soon as there's more than about 5 or 10 objects on screen, and those objects could be, various bats and slimes and stuff, or it could just be like 5 trees and a treasure chest, it just turns to sludge. It's unbelievable.
The frame rate tanks.
This ridiculous looking like
hard.
poopy pants man jogging around the world as slowly these like trees are like juddering around you. This will make you motion sick for sure.
It's one of those things where my brain could not understand what it was looking at. Like just an immediate just revulsion, just like when I tried playing Drakengard 3 in terms of oh no, this video games aren't supposed to run like this.
There's a wrongness here.
It's the uncanny valley of frame rates. It's small children and animals just instinctively knowing something is wrong.
Yeah, it's the unfamiliar situation or whatever. Like the parent leaves the room and then comes back in with a very flat expression, and the baby's like, what the hell? And then leaves and comes back again with a normal expression. It's like, what's that called? It's the strange situation, I think. Social science experiments, everyone. This game is a social science experiment. It's like the Voight comp test or whatever. Like, if this scans as reality to someone, that someone's a Cylon.
It's a good way to put it.
I mean, something that so Braden, as people with experience with RPGs, especially in the CRPG realm of procedurally generated RPGs, how does Virtual Hydlide compare to the likes of, say, a Daggerfall or Rogue or any rogue-like with this kind of stuff?
I mean, this game is so fucking weird. Like, it cannot be emphasized enough that, like, even beyond the weirdness present inherent in Hydlide as a franchise, it's just like, here is an endless. So I went into this game entirely blind, very intentionally, to be the guinea pig for this podcast. And so most of my time with this game was spent running around confusedly, hitting wasps with a sword. And then I realized that how the mini-map worked and did some graveyarding.
It is a game that really enjoys springing random bullshit on you and killing you when you least expect it, because there was some similar to Panda where I felt like I was going to complete the game. I really thought I was. I had stuff that I thought would make it possible, and then just random bullshit would happen. And then I was like, nope. I'm demotivated. That completely sucked the wind out underneath me. I don't want to play any more of this.
Yeah, it's pretty, I guess gear checky is maybe the best way to describe it, because it, such that there are difficulty spikes in this game. They are basically, as you said, spawned a bunch of bullshit that I can't get past, or the boss fights. And in the case of the latter, it's basically down to, you just need some like ranged equipment. And if you've had a hard time finding that, it's not like you can just go grind levels. Like the solution is just, you just got to go spelunk for a while until you find gear you need. And if you don't have that, you're just kind of stuck having a bad time.
Yeah, and the lack of a traditional leveling system or experience system means that you have to rely on these randomized drops that may or may not happen in your playthrough. And waiting for those drops to happen kind of sucks. And on top of that, the areas where you go to get those drops to happen may either be hilariously easy or just ungodly hard. And then on top of that, when you do get the drops to work in your favor, large swaths of this game just become boring, because now you're just murdering everything and you're waiting for the next gear check to happen. And because the combat is very mindless, where you're just using your weapon action, it just becomes monotonous and just dull.
Did you know that this game has a secret fourth difficulty?
Ooh.
Tell me
It's
more.
unlocked after beating it, apparently. I can't tell if it's done by beating it on the difficult or hard mode, but it's a fourth difficulty which appears to just be called Pro. The description simply says Expert Mode, and to be very clear, I've not personally experienced this, but to quote Mecha Link on Twitter, this appears to turn off all map functionality. Full stop.
No.
That's
Nah.
not. No. No
Nah.
one should ever do that.
That sounds terrible.
Nah.
Then you're just left
Nope.
fumbling
No.
around completely blind in this game. Or I get,
Like, unless you really know what items you need.
yeah.
But then you still gotta find where everything is.
It's like, I guess know the
that sucks.
seeds really well, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no thank you.
That's terrible.
It does look like one of the top speedrunners for this game right now is no less a person than Zophar of Zophar's Realm, everyone's favorite source of like MP3 rips of video game soundtracks. And the rule description for the run is it is a fixed seed, but they don't tell what seed it is on this rule description, which is actually really frustrating. I guess watching any one of these clips would reveal the answer, but it's weird that it's not just there.
They should still tell you the seed. Yeah, that should be. It's a 10 character.
There is a random
Like
seed
Coach.
generation category that people have run in the past too, which is really wild. The world record for random seed run is 51 minutes. So
Nasty.
that's nasty. I don't. There's so much
I
territory
don't
to be
not
grabbed here.
believe
though.
it, though. It's not impossible for me to imagine how this is possible, though, given the way that this game works.
Yeah, like it is. If you're playing this game in an optimal manner, you are basically fighting like 9 things.
Yeah, you're not taking time to fight any like henchman or like overworld enemy or anything like that. It's just boss fights and sprinting.
And why would you? There's no motivation for you to do that.
Exactly. You get nothing out of fighting those little slimes, the bats, anything like you don't get like item drops.
Which
No.
I guess that leads us to kind of one of the last things that I personally want to talk about. Virtual Hydlide has a reputation, and I know PandaMonium, when you first started your series, and we actually have a blogger on Giant Bomb who's going through the Sega Saturn's first year
Nice.
in chronological order.
Hell yeah.
But whenever and I think like there's like in hushed tones, it's like wait until you get to Virtual Hydlide.
Yeah.
It's like it's this Superman 64 of the platform for whatever reason. It's like the ET for the 2600 of the platform. It's widely regarded as being one of the worst things on the Saturn, and I don't know if it fully earns that reputation just because it is ambitious and
Right.
there's ideas that are working in the background. Like with something like Superman 64, it's like, yeah, this is something that someone was forced to make in like a basement for like 2 months and then they had to print. This game has love and attention to it. It doesn't work.
I
It's made
genuinely
by
think
people
they
who-
tried. Yeah.
Yeah, people who tried and cared, they just have no idea what they're doing.
I think it
And-
definitely, at the very least, deserves to be in like the number 3 or 4 slot, or at least like an honorable mention in like worst games for the Saturn. But there's like way more dark. You can go darker. That this hole that you're getting into, if you want to play bad things on the Saturn, like it can get darker.
It does get worse. Like if you ever played The Crow on Saturn, that one's pretty horrible.
Oh.
The Alone in the Dark port on Saturn is very that's very bad. And like Alone in the Dark isn't itself at its core a horrible game, but the port job on Saturn for the second game
Hey,
is
Braden.
such to where it's worse than Virtual Hydlide.
You should check that out.
Yeah. If you've not played The Crow, it's worth a plunge because that thing is a real piece of shit.
It's bad. The Crow's probably the worst game on the console.
I even think like, and again, this gets harder literally because you've done like very thoughtful primary source, just like sit down at interviews or like tele interviews with these folks. But like, I think stuff like Gen War is also pretty bad. Like, the first few months of the Saturn's life in North America were not great. There were a couple dim stars in the sky, of like your Virtua Fighter Remix 2 and like Panzer Dragoon and that sort of thing.
Right. And like Clockwork Knight was serviceable. Some of the sports games that came out in its first year were okay. And Pebble Beach was a launch game, so it had that going for it. But yeah.
This is not great. Like Blackfire, not great. Gen War, not great. A bunch of PC conversions that aren't tremendous. Cyber Speedway is a turd. Head On, like just it's not a lot of bangers. And versus like that first year in Japan, I don't know the list in front of me, but like I don't know, it just a bizarre divergent history basically in the two territories. But
right,
when you hold it up against specifically like the North American library, certainly a bad game, but in terms of like interesting, it's bad in interesting ways versus like third person, first person kind of shooter stuff. Like I don't know why Gen War keeps coming up because it's really kind of mean spirited because they really tried there.
They did, yeah. They didn't have the right tooling, and it was all sorts of bad circumstances led into that.
But like
they had the right idea.
I would play this.
Didn't turn out
it's
well.
no Mr. Bone.
No.
What is?
Nothing can amount to Mr. Bones.
Yeah, it's the combat basically. I don't think we've specifically talked about it, but like it's not just that it doesn't give you anything. It is just like the act of actually fighting stuff is very, very, very unsatisfying. I feel like we talked about like Bethesda about this specifically, but like combat's got no real weight to it at all.
Right.
It's less like, I think the hit boxes and hurt boxes are kind of wonky, which they kind of are, or like weapons all just feel kind of functionally the same, except some of them are ranged and some of them are not, which is the case. Like there are daggers and there are long swords and there's this like whole spectrum of stuff, and they all just kind of feel like, you just kind of sloppily swing horizontally or vertically. It is that never feels like particularly good. On top of it also providing no material benefit, and that is what this game is.
You haven't played Virtual Hydlide until you've missed a bat 10 times at 3 frames per second.
Yeah. And it's kind of where they're being like the way specifically bats are drawn, right? Because again, the screen is updating every like 3 or 4 times a second. And these bats, they could be in front of you, they could be behind you. It's kind of hard to tell just based on the way they are rendered. So you're having to like rotate this camera around you and spin yourself around to try to get these bats in front of you and in like the hurt box of your sword. And, there could be 8 of them on screen. I cannot imagine playing through that vampire house at a higher difficulty just for those bats alone. Like it's miserable.
It's terrible. If you want a handy way to turn around 180 degrees without getting hit, it is more optimal to go to the map screen and then turn the cursor of your guy 180.
I found that by accident and then rewatched your review,
same.
And you mentioned it. It is apparently a strat people are alluding to in the descriptions on these speedruns.
Oh yeah. It turns you around without like getting hit by anything, and in some cases I think it might even be faster. I don't remember if it's faster to turn around on the map than it is, but
from my experience it definitely is, because it's not having to render anything. Like it is just a static screen. It is the Doom kind of map, right? Where like you can just play Doom on that little drawn map, the vector map that you can pull up with tab. You won't shoot anything, but you can just kind of run through the rat maze or whatever. It's that, but you can't move, but you can turn.
Exactly.
Which is just really freaking weird.
Also, when you have certain items, you get different options. There's a magical sword that you can pick up, and when you select it, you can either equip it, use it, which gives it the ability to cure poison, drop it, and then there's like the special help command, which gives you little things. But there's there's no real magic system in this game. Magical abilities are tied to weapons and equipment, which is an idea, right? Like it's an interesting idea. Also, there's a very unusual status ailment system here, where I think there's only 5 statuses that I was able to notice. There's overloaded, which causes your character to become over encumbered, which is a real bummer when that happens when you're surrounded. There's curse, which I forget what cursed is, if that just disables your ability to use certain weapons. Poison, which is the usual one. Paralyze, which has the funniest like look to it. So there's like weird jagged lines on the top right corner, and you'll be unable to move, which is why the bats are so annoying, because the bats give you paralysis. And yeah, I think there was another one called Horrify, which your character just freaks out and stops listening to your commands and just does anything. It's like, cool, I can't play my game and now I'm dead. Cool, that's great.
Nothing better than dying in a hole in the ground because you've lost control of Jim because he wigged out.
Dying of fright.
It's always bad. It's always bad when it just like yanks control away from you like that. Like, I get it's like a malus, a penalty, a thing you're trying to avoid. But I can't think of a single video game where that's like a fun mechanic, where it's just like, your character is just going to do whatever for a while now. You just get to like, it's basically an extended death scene most of the time. Like it is just as fair to just kill me as opposed to watch this person make like 2 fatal mistakes and die over 30 seconds. What I'm suggesting is maybe this game didn't need that one.
No, I could have, yeah. They could have moved on without it. They'd gotten along just fine.
Yeah, it's a poor game. It's as I keep going back to, I think it could have gotten away with several things if actually playing it had been fun. Because it's not like it particularly looks great as it's trying to render this world, but it looks like a Saturn game. And when I stack the early 32-bit Saturny-ness of it and the weird Golf Company PC lineage of it and the rogue shit all together, I'm like, that's at least an interesting little soup. And if it gave me any sort of satisfaction in like running around in the world, I think they might have actually had something here, but it falls apart once you start walking around. Like the first slime you encounter, this game shatters. And as I recall, you don't even have your sword equipped at the start of the game, because I remember having to go into the menu and be like, oh, I'm just basically bare knuckle boxing green slimes right now in the world.
And you, like, your first sword, it's like a little toothpick. It's like this tiny little pocket knife thing. Like it's worthless.
Not since East 3 have you started with a worse sword.
Yeah.
That's Virtual Hydlide. In the end, you rescue 3 fairies and fight a boss that teleports around, and you save a princess, and you get a congratulations. It's the whole thing. If you know what you're doing, like the speed runs for this game are approaching half an hour. Playing this blind, I felt like if the gameplay kind of not sucked, there's probably about 2 or 3 hours of game in here at a leisurely pace. And the notion of like
almost like the spirit of a mystery dungeon game,
right? That's going back to the net hacky kind of thing. The idea that I would replay this is, I appreciate the spirit behind that, I guess, but. Like, we made a game so fun, you'll keep coming back. It's like, that's quite the claim. I don't know if that quite holds up. So I don't know. I think it's kind of earned its place in history as a Kusoge.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely infamous, for sure.
It's a real piece of shit.
We should put it on a big list. We should celebrate, as we do, by acknowledging its place in history along such luminary titles as Soma Bringer on a list of games. So I've pulled up the list. Have we all got access to this thing?
Why don't you say the bit.ly?
That is bit.ly/OTDE rank. For those who don't have that in front of you, such as those listening, say, driving to see your family and friends here around the solstice, around the holiday times, because that's definitely when this was recorded. We have got a list. It is 33 entries long, thanks to a bunch of arcade stuff we've added. Let's just go. The bottom of this list right now is defined by Secret of the Stars for the SNES, Aiden Chronicles the First Mage for the N64, and on the very bottom is Unlimited Saga for the PlayStation 2. One of the only Square games we're ever going to look at. by way of contrast, the top 3 entries on here are Xenosaga Episode 1, Der Will zur Macht, Suikoden, a Konami joint, and on the very top of our list, Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven. Maybe you've heard of it. It rules. That game's incredible. This is less incredible. We're gonna probably open bids up here. Let's start at the midpoint. Let's be very generous. How do we feel about this versus East 3?
I think East 3 has a banger soundtrack.
Yeah. Also, this game has, like, functionally no soundtrack.
It's not
like,
good.
It has sound effects that are bad.
Just a lot of, like, warbly, smushy environmental noises.
Bad digitized grunts.
MIDI strings, but very light.
It's got MIDI loops that are very short, and they are very repetitive.
And then a couple Japanese like instructional texts backmasked and played backwards for your vampires.
Every sound effect you listen to during combat is boy howdy. It's a lot.
It's a lot of oomph.
You're telling me a company best known for golf games isn't the best at Foley work?
Okay, you joke, but I've played a surprising amount of Pebble Beach for the Saturn, and the golf sounds in that game are actually okay.
Yeah,
it does nail down the golf sounds.
It does not surprise me that you have played a lot of Pebble Beach for the Saturn.
It's one hole, you just gotta, or one course rather, 18 holes. Which makes it empirically worse than my copy of Golf Magazine Presents 36 Great Holes with Fred Couples, which is literally right next to my copy of Pebble Beach on my display shelf. God. Anyway, sicko
Moving
shit.
on.
Let's go. Okay, so let's just work in quartiles then. Let's go down to Lord of the Rings: The Third Age for the GBA. Who you got? Nick, if you're not familiar with Lord of the Rings: The Third Age for the GBA, it's a bad strategy game.
I was gonna say I played the PS2/GameCube whatever gen game, that Lord of the Rings,
the Sir Ian McKellen Storytime RPG.
Right,
that game's tragic.
But I have not played the GBA game.
we didn't really care for it.
I would probably put this just a hair above Xenosaga Episode 1 probably. Take the third place. It's not the best game on this list for sure, but it's ambitious, right?
Suikoden. I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
So I put it below the Third Age because at least it's semi-coherent in terms of its mechanics. I didn't like the Third Age and how it interpolates, especially its whole use of commanders and generals, and how that can limit your movement. But
I mean, that game is also clearly made by 6 people in 6 months.
Yeah, it's of that era where the handheld division of any publisher was 5 to 10 people.
Shovelware factory.
Yeah, it's successful in what it's doing, but what it's doing is not particularly interesting, which in a way makes it better than the Third Age.
Now we come to what I think is the funniest matchup. So Tower of Duraga versus Virtual Hydlide. So both of these games are misery trains. Both of these games are very ambitious.
Tower of Duraga is important. This game is not.
Honestly, I think the more interesting comparison is down with Revengers of Vengeance. I'll tell you why. Virtual Hydlide, as we've noted, is a pretty bad game, but I think the ways that it is bad are actually kind of funny. I think it just about wraps around to being a guilty pleasure-ish thing to look at and chuckle at, which is exactly what Revengers of Vengeance is, right? That is just a bad fighting game that has an RPG stapled around it. The fighting game is also bad, but the RPG is very bad.
There's also a top-down shooter that is bad.
Every constituent part of it, down to the fact that it was made by apparently one person, very, very eminently poke fun at and laughable at-ish. And Virtual Hydlide lives and breathes that energy. And below that, you start getting into, as I said, Draken, and then you get your, bottom 3. I think Virtual Hydlide punches above those.
I think Virtual Hydlide is better than Unlimited Saga. Yeah. I'm willing to say, because Unlimited Saga made me feel nothing. Whereas Virtual Hydlide, it was a combination of disgust and enthusiasm.
Well, I mean, Unlimited Saga is complete incoherence. There's coherence to Virtual Hydlide. It's not fun or enjoyable coherence, but it's got parts that move that don't cause the entire thing to break.
I guess the other thing I'll say in defense of Virtual Hydlide is it's brief, right? Like Secret of the Stars,
Whereas
in
Unlimited
theory,
30-hour
Saga
game.
is-
Aiden Chronicles could be
Yes.
120 hours long based on how
knows?
slow the opening of that game is. Virtual Hydlide gets its shit in, right? It's like a good wrestler. Like it's doing a barnstorming tour of Off the Deep End.
Oh, so it's the Goldberg of
Yeah,
video games?
it's got that, does the jackhammer, does the spear, gets the pin, everyone goes away. Like Virtual Hydlide is a good one for this series, right? Like people like a Virtual Hydlide when it shows up. No one wants it to hang around. No one wants Virtual Hydlide to like sleep on the couch or anything. But when it shows up, people like it. You know?
You can get a crowd of people to watch a speedrun of Virtual Hydlide. You just can't convince any of them to
Yeah,
play it.
like learn Virtual
Right.
Hydlide. Which, like, for me, that reads above Secret of the Stars, which is just a slog. And for me, I'd put this between. It's above or below Revengeance of Vengeance for me.
It's definitely
I would put
above
this
Draken.
below Draken.
You put below
What?
Draken. Okay.
Yeah, because Draken's funny.
Draken is pretty funny.
No, Virtual.
Also, I watched
Virtual
and
Hydlide's
finished
also
Draken,
funny.
so I can confirm that Draken is a finishable video
Yeah.
game.
I mean, I've seen plenty of people finish this game too.
I will put my foot down and say that it definitely goes above Secret of the
Yeah.
Stars.
Yes.
I can live with between.
You got to remember that this game transcends into art with how
Yes.
bad it is and
Yes.
how.
I think that's kind
the
of where
tale
we're
of
gonna
how it was
put
made.
it then. Like
Yes,
below
I think-
Draken.
This
Or
is
what do you
in the
think,
same
Jeff?
category as Revengers of Vengeance and Draken, where it's like it's a combination of malice and incompetence.
Yeah, like we got
That
so
just-
much mileage out of Draken and that goddamn shark.
And it's on our podcast.
Yeah,
image.
like we owe our identity to Draken in some sense. So
All right, I think that's okay. I can
so
go with
above
that.
Secret of the Stars, below Draken.
Yes.
Okay.
Nice. It's not last.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, it's just too much of a functional video game. Like we've played actual games that don't function.
Yeah. Those bottom three games are very, very bad.
Wretched.
I'll avoid
Yeah,
them.
like you
Yeah.
could take all three of those and shuffle them around into virtually any order, and I'd be almost okay with all of them, depending on the day. Aiden Chronicles is terrible.
Yeah,
Aiden
PandaMonium.
Chronicles
At least
is
you're not
a game trying so hard to be a serious RPG on the N64, a noted RPG console. Whenever you talk
Right.
to people online, they're like, "I love the N64 and its JRPGs."
and it's shmups. You know,
Yeah.
big fan of all the shmups.
Star Soldier is not that bad, but yeah, as soon as you get out of there,
Hey man, people
Ugh.
love what the fuck is the name of the treasure
Sin and
game?
Punishment.
Sin and Punishment.
Sin and Punishment. Yeah, I mean that
Yeah.
one's
that game kicks ass.
kind of all right. I don't know
Actually,
if
Sin
it's
and
like a
Punishment's
shmup,
kind of
but
bad.
it's
Get
it's
bonus.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's very fun.
Okay, well, that's where it's going to live then. It is the new number 31 on this list, right between Draken and Secret of the Stars. Congratulations, Virtual Hydlide.
You barely escaped the bottom three.
And congrats to Craig Statler.
Big congrats
Yeah.
to Craig. Are you guys on that Discord server? The Deep Listens podcast one, in that channel where you had me like, you asked me what time I was available. I sent a few pictures from the TND Soft olden days that I just randomly found on Twitter one day. It just came by my feed, and it's like a few pictures. It's the guys, like there's about 12 of them, and they all have these TND Soft
Oh
jackets.
my god.
They're like
Yes.
these big white poofy jackets.
Oh my, yeah, these dudes are.
That's the Virtual Hydlide crew right
They
there.
are repping
Yeah,
a set.
that is a group of men who make golf games for the Sega Saturn.
And like the third image is a Google Street View of the building that they were formerly headquartered in, and you can see it's in dire need of a power washing. But this is like, middle of a Japanese suburb next to some houses and stuff. Like you could put a convenience store in this building. It could really be anything.
They were
And this-
making it happen in this building.
I remember
it was where the magic was happening.
I saw a picture of like the
That's right.
Gynax studio at a certain point, and I think it was like a 3 or 4 floor building, but the aesthetic is absolutely this. Like, it's just a concrete,
Right.
commie block looking building. It's like, yeah, that's where Evangelion came out of. Like, that's where Princess Maker was
Right.
made, right? Like, it's
You could
And
throw it in
then,
the middle of Sakura Gaoka out of Shenmue, and it would fit right
Absolutely.
in. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the crew.
Oh, Jeff. Oh, now I see why you asked this guy. He said the word Shenmue unprompted without you
look, I've
asking.
got a type. Okay, I like North Dakota. Okay, I like Shenmue.
Oh,
I grew up in
shucks.
Minot, so
Hell yeah. Oh, no way, really?
Minot Air Force
Okay.
Base. Anyway, when I was a lad.
Got it. Okay.
So done my
Yeah.
time.
I haven't actually been to Minot. I've only hung around eastern North Dakota so far.
There's
but
not a lot there. I'm glad I
That's
wasn't
what I hear.
there when I was a teen.
yeah, I think that's definitely a good thing.
But yeah, I've spent plenty of time North Dakota, Minnesota, and then my whole family's from Wisconsin. So,
Oh, nice. Right on. Okay. Yeah, I grew up in St. Paul and then moved out here for
alright.
college and
yeah,
stuck
they're
around.
Eau Claire
So-
area. So that's everything
Gosh,
orbits
okay.
Minneapolis, St. Paul. That MSP.
Yep, that's the sun right there for the upper Midwest. World revolves around Minneapolis, unless you're from Chicago.
Boo.
Boo.
Okay, we're gonna wrap with that. That was an episode. We've talked about Virtual Hydlide. The solstice has come to an end. The days will start getting longer, and it'll become warm, and Chris will be able to come out of his shell.
Yes, those very cold 50-degree winters where he's from.
Bay
Yeah,
Area December. It's almost as bad as a Bay Area January.
I think we're getting highs in the negatives this week up where
Okay,
I'm at
I'll be
right now.
quiet then. I'm a California boy. I
I
complain
went
about
out
when
in
it's 50
shorts
degrees.
yesterday.
Man, today is no high of 14 degrees above zero. Never mind, it's a nice day today.
I will
So.
I will not talk.
Well, now that the show's better and it's fixed, thanks for tuning into this installment of Off the Deep End, the Sans Chris version. As mentioned, you can send any questions and inquiries to inquiries@deep.lol. That's why it's called Inquiries. Also, if you'd like to keep this show and the Deep Listens mothership afloat, kick us a few bucks. You go to patreon.com. We are continuing to do, at least through the end of the year, the same deal we've been doing all year. You put in your $1, you can put a name of a game into our slush pile that we will draw from. That deal is probably going to change next year. The figure may go as high as, if you're ready, if you can maybe sit down and brace yourself, $3. Yeah,
Gasp.
I know we've really let it go to our heads.
We've become the fat cat capitalists we thought we weren't going to be.
These legitimate Sega Saturns don't pay for themselves. But really, any dollar amount is greatly appreciated. And as you said, you kind of double the effect of it by getting a game in that slush pile if you join by the end of the year. So that is at patreon.com/deeplistens. Special shout out to the artist known as SuperSex420 for providing us with a podcast theme called Halfway. Listen to other great tracks by SuperSex420 are available on bandcamp.com. Nick, thank you so much for coming on to the show. We really appreciate having you here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Where can folks find your stuff?
Yeah, if you just go to YouTube and type in PandaMonium reviews every US Sega Saturn game, my channel should show up. If not, just try typing in Virtua Cop documentary, and that should make it show up too. Yeah, and I'm also on Twitter and Instagram as well, usual social media sites. So, but yeah, PandaMonium spelt like the animal, like PandaMonium.
And you've got one of those Patreons as well, I think, right?
Yeah, I recently started one at the request of viewers. I was originally not wanting to make one because I can't make content monthly just because of how long it takes me to do videos. But they were like, make one anyway, and I'm like, fine. So I did.
Damn you, fine.
And so far, I know. Like, damn it, fine. Give me money, whatever. Do what you want. But it's been great. The support on there has been tremendous. Way more than I thought would happen. And Deep Listens has been one of them. So thank you for pledging your support.
Personally, I'm really glad that's gone as well as it has, because the stuff you were making is too good to not have some amount of support. Like it's a remarkable work you do. So
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
that's it. We're gonna sign off there. See you next time, and remember, there's no such thing as cheating in Virtual Hydlide. They literally just turn on icons on the map for easy difficulty. It's It's actually kind of wild. Bye.
To the three. I'd like great job and a good birdie. I don't like conservatively, just a little. Game pressure, consistency. 3 to the 4 to the 5 to the putt. Today is make or break. Can you make the cut? I've got a great eagle on hole number 9. Think you can get it inside mine? Try your best to match and study my shot. I've got to catch my rivals a lot quicker than I thought. Great, I can get my second shot on the green from here. The real battle starts now at Pebble Beach. I've really enjoyed playing 4 days of golf with you. Now, drain that putt with me. Drain that putt with me. Don't give up. Drain that birdie with me. Hit that shit for me. My best shot. Cut driver. Nice par. Let's hope you win next time.